Christ. Amen. So the pastor was sitting with a group of children, and he was trying to teach them something about the Bible, about God. And so he asked them a question. He said, "What's brown and furry and has a furry tail and stores up nuts in a tree for the winter?" And the kids all kind of sat around and looked at each other, and finally one little boy says, "Well, it sounds like a squirrel, but since we're in church, it must be Jesus." So, have you ever seen like bumper stickers where people say Jesus is the answer? Yeah. But what's the question? What's the question? And I think today, as we celebrate Reformation Sunday, I think that's an important question for us. If Jesus is the answer, what is the question that we're asking? You see, when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany, 501 years ago, 500, we celebrated 500 years last year, so 501. What he was concerned with is that those in power, both government, the church, society, whatever, those in power were using their power to subjugate and oppress the people. I mean, they even made up, different rules and regulations and laws that the people were supposed to follow, or they wouldn't get into heaven. Okay? And so Martin Luther was so upset and so angered by the injustice and the abuse that he saw of the people that he served, because he was a pastor of a church in Wittenberg, and he served people who were so weighed down with all of these rules and all of these laws. And what he recognized was that in the midst of all of that, they had lost sight of Jesus. It's kind of the same thing that Jesus encountered in his day with the Pharisees. The Pharisees who were in power, they used that power to get themselves more power and make themselves richer and gain more status. And they used their power and their authority and their influence to subjugate and oppress people. And so today, as we sit here, as we are now 501 years out from Martin Luther's radical act of civil disobedience, really, that's what it was. I mean, he nailing those theses to that door, it started a revolution. It started a reformation, changing people. But the focus was to focus our minds and our hearts back on Jesus. Away from the rules and all of the things and all of the trappings that had taken over and obscured the gospel, obscured what Jesus was trying to teach us, obscured the message, the good news of Jesus Christ, that in God we have forgiveness. In God we have grace. We have grace. It's funny, as I was singing A Mighty Fortress earlier, go back and read the words to that hymn. You see, when Luther wrote this hymn, he wrote it kind of as a teaching tool. Because people would hear the song, they would memorize the words, and it would teach them something essential to know about God, about Jesus Christ. And there's that one fine little line in there. One little word subdues him. One little word subdues him. And it was that little word that Martin Luther was all about. And that word is grace. Rather than having to earn God's love, earn God's favor, earn God's salvation, Martin Luther reminds us that it's about grace. It's about grace. It's about the gift that God gives us in Jesus Christ that we do not deserve, that we cannot earn, that we cannot merit. And so Martin Luther was reminding us to go back to Jesus, go back to the cross of Jesus Christ, and recognize what it's really all about. There's this game that I play on my phone. If I'm sitting doing nothing and maybe a little bored or something, and I play this game, and it's called Summoner's War. And can you give me the next slide, please? That's one of the pictures. That's one of the pictures from this game, and it's a I fight you. We fight the monsters. We get together and we fight the bad monsters. This picture, this graphic in this game was created by, this game was created in the halls of video games, which we all know are evil, right? Video games are evil and bad and rotten and all that kind of stuff, but your pastor plays it, so I don't know. But what do you recognize in this picture? What do you see? The cross. This character is a healer in the game. And that one symbol off to the side with the cross, that's a symbol of healing. And look at the end of her staff. What do you see there? The cross again. Millions of people around the world play this game. When I'm on this game, sometimes I talk with people, I chat with people in China. Sometimes I chat with people in Europe. Sometimes I chat with people in Russia as we're playing this game. And in the midst of this game, it's universally recognized that the symbol of healing is the cross. Now, they may not understand everything about the cross of Jesus Christ and the healing and the salvation that comes from the cross of Christ, but in this game, it is intuitively understood by all of these people who play it. And most of them are not my age, I'm just here to tell you. Most of them are closer to Anna's age. She's the one who got me hooked on the game, so it's her fault. So yeah. So what do we see? What is the question? When we see a bumper sticker or whatever, when we talk about Jesus is the answer, what is the question? I think this image, in some ways, answers that. The question is, where do we go for healing, for protection, for salvation? We go to the cross of Christ. That's what Luther reminded us of. He reminded us to go to our knees before the cross of Christ. And one of the things, especially in this last day, one of the things that has really been on my mind is when we talk about salvation, and especially salvation from sin. I think too often we immediately jump to, well, that's how we get into heaven. Jesus saves us from our sin, but that's how we get into heaven. But I think that it has practical ramifications for our world today. What is one of the sins that we are struggling with right now in our nation that oppresses us, that weighs us down, that causes our hearts to break? Isn't that all of the hatred and violence that is around us? Doesn't that just cause your heart to break when you see people, innocent people in worship, being gunned down? We need to remember that the cross of Christ and salvation from sin is not just about there, it's about here and now. And what that cross teaches us, is that the answer to violence is not more violence. The answer to hatred is not more hatred. The answer to anger is not more anger. You know, I've been hearing calls for more violence, more, death penalty and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, that's not the answer. The answer to our being horrified at people being killed is not to kill more people. It's just not the answer. And that is most certainly not the answer that Jesus portrayed for us on the cross. And that's what Martin Luther wants to bring us back to on this Reformation Sunday, that the answer is Jesus. And when Jesus was on the cross, dying, he didn't respond with anger. He didn't respond with hatred. He didn't respond with a call to more violence. He looked at those who had nailed him there to the cross, and he looked up to heaven and he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." That is the response. That is the faithful response of Christians and the Christian community. Anybody can get mad about violence and go out and seek more violence. You don't need to be a person of faith. But it is only through faith in Jesus Christ and his cross that we can recognize where the true answer is, where the true answer lies. And that is in a reformation of our world away from violence, away from anger, away from hatred, and a turning of our hearts toward God. Amen.